This week on Red Dead Radio, these guys played the first 5 hours of Red Dead Redemption 2, and now they're going to talk about it. Hey, we're about to start the show and talk about the first 5 hours of Red Dead Redemption 2. Before we do, hey, this is what I do for a living. You want to go to reddeadradio.com. You can support me on Patreon. I hope that you will. I know a lot of people ask. I think we put a good product together here. Actually, lots of good products. If you're not familiar with the other stuff I do, Hot Blip and a Jump, video documentary series about the reason games matter. I hope you'll watch it and listen to it. And I also do a little thing every now and then called Pockets Full of Soup, the story of the people we're thankful for. Check it out. You can also find me on Kind of Funny Games, kindoffunny.com. And every now and then I'm moonlighting over at IGN, some other spots. And hey, today with these gentlemen from GameSpot. GameSpot, good. Hi friends, welcome to Red Dead Radio, the Red Dead Redemption podcast. I'm your host, Jared Petty, and as always, we're going straight to the Wild Wild Guest.
We're going straight to the Wild Wild Guest. We're going straight to the Wild Wild Guest. Yeah!
Who are you?
I'm Jake Decker.
And where are you from, Jake Decker?
GameSpot.
And who are you?
Also from GameSpot, I'm Mike Mahardy.
And y'all are here because you've played the first 5 hours of Red Dead Redemption 2.
Yep.
That's kind of spectacular. Did you get yourself like a tattoo to commemorate the occasion?
Yeah, but it's not something I could show on camera.
Oh, left or right cleft?
Left.
Left cleft. There we go. What about you, Jake? Do you have any tattoos?
No tattoos.
No tattoos for
Not
this.
yet, though.
But you do have that experience burned into your brain. So I got some hands-on time with Red Dead 2, but I cannot begin to tell you how jealous I am. 5 hours, you've seen the game from beginning to well into gameplay. So let's stop with me talking and head right to y'all. What's it like?
You want to start?
Yeah, I can
start. There's so much.
It's overwhelming, and I think that was one thing that a lot of people who saw that hour and a half kind of came away with. Not in a bad way, but it was like, wow, there are so many systems at play in this game, and the benefit of having the tutorial, the opening, is that we were actually able to get used to all those different systems and kind of contextualize them, which I don't think a lot of other people were necessarily able to, at least to the same extent we were. So yeah, I mean, I think just being able to see all those systems was overwhelming and really cool.
When you mention those systems, is it a tutorialized contextualization that takes place, or is it something a little more organic?
It's like a very, very well disguised tutorial section.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty organic. It's the intro itself. So we came into the demo and Rockstar had the game paused on the intro cutscene. So we just press start, watch the rest of it, Arthur Morgan's narration, etc. I'm not going to spoil any specifics, but you get into it and you meet a few characters, and they show you like how much better horse riding is, how you can horse drift, how you can catch up to some. It's the basic fare from the first game where you can match another rider's speed. This one is a little more nuanced. You can double tap X if you want to go. So it's kind of like assuming you're in a convoy or like a posse, because you can be at a certain point in a line of horses, and then it says to move back in the line. Like if Dutch tells you to move back, you could press circle. Your horse will go to the side, slow down so everybody comes ahead of you. Or if Dutch says, hey, Arthur, go check it out up there, you can press X or tap X and you'll go to the front of the pack. That's just kind of that's one of those small details that kind of makes you feel like part of the world, I guess.
And that allows you to start conversations with different people in the line as well. I noticed that when I was playing through mine, is I could ride up to John and just start with him, and then drop back and talk to somebody else. And
that's kind of what was so amazing and so far in this 5 hours. When the game releases, it could be too much almost. The stuff that we saw between moments, from what we saw, the 5 hours, etc. It was pretty well paced, coming across incidents.
Yeah,
and
there was
encounters.
Something interesting happening pretty much everywhere we looked. We were like, all right, well, we're gonna head this way, and sure enough, there'd be someone doing something, and of course, we'd want to get involved and see what that is. And as you saw, you can totally do that. The interactions are so malleable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, let me ask you about that. You talk about going someplace and always finding something to do. So Red Dead is, I really am an advocate of this idea that the West is a character in Red Dead 2. Now, part of that character is a sense of vastness. So you sit off on your hill in the distance and look out over it, and it just looks big and empty like the West should. My perception has been that it's not actually empty. It just looks that way from afar. And the moment you start riding in, there's actually full of things. Was that your experience?
Yeah, I would say so. We kind of got sidetracked during our open world mission or our open world exploration point, where we ended up in this bog and kind of the amount of things just going on in the different biomes. Like as soon as we went in the bog, our horse was getting spooked more often by crocodiles or like any number of snakes and everything. You can notice because it was like darting side to side. He was a little harder to control, not least because the water was up to his like knees and everything too. But we came across. It seemed like the different people had like different flavors around there too. Like I came across the dude who was we just heard retching first and someone like throwing up, vomiting, and I see him like stumbling out of the woods. And then we're like, we used the NPC interaction. We're like, hey, what's wrong? He's like, I need medicine, please, some sort of tonic or anything. And I was like, okay. And he's got vomit all over his shirt. So I'm like, I'm going to help him out. So I give him the tonic and he downs it like in one gulp. And then he's like, thank you. Never eat those pink flowers. It turns out he was trying to like trip, essentially, like looking for plants with hallucinogenic properties. And the pink flowers apparently were poison. And I'm pretty sure that's how you find out that you can use those pink flowers to poison other people once you get it more into the alchemy, so to speak, or the botany and the kind of like making different herbs and salves or so.
Yeah, because there's a ton of not necessarily obvious collectibles laying around. You see a pretty flower, you walk up, you hit that L2. Let's talk for a second about that consistent interface. It's sort of like old point-and-click adventure games when they reach their zenith, where you could just point at anything that would contextually understand what to do. Have you seen that exercised in a contemporary kind of third-person adventure game anytime recently as well as you did in this demo?
I think early on when we went to that house that had been taken over by that other gang and you kill them, and then you go inside and there's objects all over the house that you can look at, you can examine. While you're doing that, you're also emptying out cabinets for supplies for your own camp. So I think that's kind of what you're asking, right? Like you can piece together stories just by going into these houses, picking up different things. Like same thing when you go into a shop, you can pick up pretty much anything, look at it. A lot of times Arthur will comment on it. And it was kind of cool seeing just an extra layer on this open world formula that Rockstar doesn't typically do. I mean, except for with LA Noire when you examine all those objects. But yeah, it reminded me a lot of LA Noire, how you could basically interact with many things that were in front
like
of you.
Like Shenmue, but good? Okay.
I'd say like in terms of recent games that have done that, like it does remind me of like Elder Scrolls Fallout when you go into a house and like obviously those games are more focused on the scavenging for items, like specifically for health or weapon parts. Red Dead, it felt more like it was tying you to the environment. But as far as other like big AAA games that have done this, I can't really recall one that's done one to this extent. There's usually that really thick layer between the player and the world. Because like, you have Skyrim, like you can explore the world on a massive scale, but then when you get it down to the nitty gritty, you start to see kind of the facade like wearing away. Red Dead, it seems like it's focused on scope in the large sense as well as the granular, and that's kind of that's where it becomes daunting because there's not always you're going from one side quest to the next in the 5 hours we had, and it's like every miscellaneous thing you come across, every character you meet could potentially have as much impact as that of a normal side quest or main story in another game. And that was
does kind of
daunting.
blur, right? I mean, you don't really know exactly.
Yeah.
And I like that they're trying to break down the storytelling expectations. I mean, how long has it been? What was the beginning of starting a game and there's a guy with an exclamation mark over his head, or there's a question mark over his head, and we know that's the signal to move forward to the next thing. What I saw of this game really seemed to be trying to subvert and recreate that expectation. Was that your impression?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like Assassin's Creed Odyssey just came out, and hearing what you just said, I was like, yeah, that's Assassin's Creed. Yeah, which whatever. That game's very fun. I like it, but that's my experience so far because it like you said, it doesn't feel like it's like world and then main quest and then side quest. It doesn't feel like they're stacked on top of each other. It feels like one big thing, and I think that does a lot of things. It makes the main quest feel more organic when you get into it because it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm done playing the game, I'm going to go play the story now. It makes those feel pretty, it blurs the lines between those, but it also makes those like minor side quests. I don't feel like I'm just passing chores to get to the next big thing. I feel like this right now is the big thing. Like it's the game is forcing me and Arthur to live in the present, which is really nice because I'm not just thinking, oh, I wonder what's going to happen at that waypoint that I put on the map. I'm actually thinking what's going to happen around this corner.
How does the game reinforce that? How's it making that happen? How's it changing your attitude? What mechanically, design-wise, story structure-wise is taking place that's giving you that impression? If you're going to peel back the layers over it a little bit and look at how it's put together, what about that deliberate design is making you feel that way?
I think it's just seeing the world react to you in so many different ways. One example in particular that comes to me was when we first relocated to Valentine, near Valentine, and I forget who it was. I think Dutch was like, yeah, some of the boys are at the saloon. You can go check that out. So we're like, all right, I'll go over there. Or I don't know. We take our horse over there. I walk in. Bill Williamson is there, and we start chatting with these ladies. And then all of a sudden, a fight breaks out. And this guy comes up to me, and I had just cleaned. I had shaved and like combed my hair, made myself look nice. And this big guy grabs me. He's like, "Hey, pretty boy." And Rockstar was like, "So if you let yourself go, that he would have been like, 'Hey, you ugly moron,' or whatever." So it just like seeing those little tiny interactions that normally like you don't typically see in a game, like a game that it kind of reminds me of Fable, but like how they would kind of try to react to you, but it still felt very surface level. While this, on the other hand, it feels very deep and like very minute, and I think that adds to this.
So kind of a natural flow to it.
Yes.
I feel like some of the very best game design you don't notice except in the fun or except in the immersion. The less you see the seams, the better the design. That seems to be what you're describing here. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, I've been using this admittedly shitty metaphor where it's like most games you're in a room and then like say you punch a hole in the wall and then you can see the developers right there on their computers kind of like controlling everything. It seems like in Red Dead 2 if you punch a hole in the wall you'll see another room, or if you fall through the floor you're going to be in the basement, not just empty space. It feels like there is more game to see the deeper you go. It's not just I'm not seeing the boundaries, I'm not seeing the code at the bottom of it all. I'm seeing more game. And obviously I think it's a deep hole to dig for Rockstar, because like you have players that are going to naturally, if this is consistent, I'm going to want to go deeper and see if this is consistent. And it seems like they're trying to account for all that. And like it's a challenge they put in front of themselves. And from what we've seen, it's pretty encouraging, because I don't know, like it does feel very much like you're just seeing more game the deeper you dig into it. And it doesn't feel like there are boundaries yet.
Do either of y'all ever play NetHack? So NetHack, ASCII-based roguelike, and it's been in continual development for decades. There's no graphics, so all the development time has gone into gameplay. And the NetHack hook gimmick is they thought of everything. Anything you can try to think of, there's a unique response to. This seems like that design philosophy employed on the AAA scale. And there's been very, very few occasions. Has anyone ever taken that ambition and really followed through on it before?
Last year with Divinity, Original Sin 2, I would say, got close, or at least closer than I've been used to recently. And I think a lot of us at GameSpot were like, this is probably the closest a game has got to an actual Dungeons and Dragons session that we've played recently, as insofar as you can't really see where the boundaries end. And like, you can be pretty confident that if you do something, there will be a unique reaction to it. I can't think of anything else.
There are no Cheetos nor Mountain Dew in Divinity Original Sin 2, so it's not as close as it could be. It's close, but I do feel like those two things are essential components of any D&D session. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
I would definitely say Legend of Zelda: A Breath of the Wild a little bit. I think the big difference with Red Dead is that you're seeing all these different interactions with NPCs, while Legend of Zelda, the NPCs are very scripted. They have their dialogue that they need to tell you. But in terms of the world design of Breath of the Wild, how whenever you pushed against the world, it would push back in some form or another. And I think you even mentioned that with Red Dead. Like, no matter how hard you push against this world, something is going to push back at you, which is like coming off Assassin's Creed, which, like you said, is a fun game. Like, that game, I can push against it. I can do whatever I want, and no one is going to care except for maybe an NPC screaming in the background.
Yeah, there's this really interesting, actually, one of my favorite like critics on YouTube. His name's Joseph Anderson, and he does a lot of stuff with like open world games, like really deep stuff. And he has this system where like if he says like a game could be fun, but if you really want to look at it, would this world work without you being in it? And then you have to see like if the people in each settlement, do they have a place to get food? Do they have a place where they're sleeping? In Assassin's Creed, no, they're just wandering around these circles, and they're kind of there. Like it's like, I don't know, like imagine they're going about their entire life is within this 5-foot radius. In Red Dead, I could actually see all these characters doing stuff when I'm not there. And that's not like the first game to have done something like that, like this actual world that exists separate from the player.
Sure, Shenmue again comes to mind.
Right, yeah, exactly. And Red Dead, it seems like, is very much like, I'm assuming all these NPCs have a family that they go back to when the sun goes down, or some specific place that they really like to eat. And again, like when you really want to look at that, maybe if you did follow one NPC around, you would discover that that's not the case. In most games, you kind of, like we were talking yesterday, you kind of have that suspension of disbelief where you're like, okay, I'm just going to imagine that person has a favorite diner, and that's going to increase my fun in this game. Seems like Rockstar is very much saying like, oh, but what if we actually did incorporate that, like that kind of personality, and if you did follow them, for instance, what would happen?
Well, they know we're going to try.
Exactly.
I mean, they know day one there's going to be videos of people trying. I'm going to try
out for them, yeah.
And we're going to sit down and be like, how real is Red Dead Redemption 2? People are going to do it. I think of a story I heard at GDC years ago where the designer, I brought up Shenmue, which is a much smaller, like a microcosmic attempt at this many years ago that failed in many ways, succeeded in some. But the dev was talking about how when they were working on the game, they wanted everybody to have their own life, do their own logical things at different times of day in this little town in Japan. And the dev team came in one morning and the town was empty. They couldn't find anybody. They were walking the streets of the dev kit and the entire population of the town had vanished. And they're like, what is... And finally, somebody wandered in to the convenience store. And the entire population of the town, every character in Shenmue had gone to breakfast at the same time to pick it up at the convenience store. And because they'd all walked in at once, they'd trapped the doors with their bodies. And so they were all trying to walk out at the same time. But they had, in fact, followed their cycle, gone to have breakfast at breakfast time. It's just everybody decided to have breakfast at once. And they actually had to reduce the realism a little bit to make that process go through. I wonder what kind of things Rockstar's taken into account for this.
Yeah. That also reminds me of, have you heard the story of the vanishing cats in Dwarf Fortress?
This sounds vaguely familiar because I love Dwarf Fortress.
Yeah. So again, like if for people who don't know, like Dwarf Fortress is again kind of like this exact kind of game in that it's an understatement to say it's layered systems. It is system upon system upon system. The developers constantly, their development is changing things to make sure that these literally hundreds of thousands of other systems interact well. So one day they came in after like this minor update and they noticed that cats all over this dwarf fortress, it's a really in-depth dwarf fortress sim. The cats were all dying. They're like, what the hell is going on? And they tried everything. They're like, is there food poisoned, or are they like walking through like some area that they're not supposed to? Are people eating the cats? But no, it turned out that they had like upped the alcohol percentage in beer, so people were more likely to throw up, and then the cats themselves were lapping up the alcohol on the floor and dying from poisoning. Yeah, and it's that kind of story where I'm like, I wonder, I would like kill to hear what kind of stories like those happened in Red Dead throughout development.
You know, fortunately, y'all are a better place. Being part of GameSpot, you are better placed than most human beings to get those answers. Yeah. I mean, is that something we could look forward to, hopefully, sitting down in here?
Can't confirm anything, but we're working on stuff for sure.
Sounds rad. I cannot wait to hear some of this. I really can't. And by the way, GameSpot, you guys, you have plans around the Red Deads, right?
Mm-hmm. We do. We have a show.
What?
Yeah, it's gonna be every Friday, starting next Friday. The first episode. I don't want to say too much, but the first episode is sort of the DNA of Red Dead Redemption 2, where it draws its inspiration from. Particularly looking at Rockstar games, because that is one thing playing it that really stuck out to a lot of us is how, I mean, it is 8 Rockstar studios making this game, and you can really tell, like, oh, this is some Max Payne here, this is some Bully over here, this is some LA Noire here, and of course, Grand Theft Auto 5.
What a great idea for a video. I wish I'd have made that.
But yeah, and then we'll have more when the game releases.
Will these be documentary style, discussion style? How are you approaching it?
A little bit of both, I'd say. I think we've got some discussions planned. We have some sort of like features planned. I don't know about documentary stuff, just because that requires a bit more access than we might have.
Okay. Yeah. GameSpot's Quick Draw. This will be, so this is next Friday, and we're recording this. So it's this Friday. If you're watching the week this comes out, it'll be this Friday. You can find that at GameSpot on your YouTube, your website, etc.
Yeah.
All right. Lovely. Yep. Should watch that. I'm kind of a fan of these whole let's make a show about Red Dead Redemption 2. So I'll be watching. Absolutely. Yeah. That's rad. Let's talk about that trailer that just came out and what it reveals. Everybody's been breaking down granular details. I broke down granular details earlier this week. If you haven't watched that yet, I recommend you do. But beyond the details, y'all have played the game, so you can contextualize things in that trailer that reveal things that don't look like revelations until you understand you played
Yeah.
the game. Can you talk about some of that for us? Give some context on things from the trailer that actually mean more to you because you've had hands-on time?
The thing that I saw during the trailer, well, you mentioned the hygiene when the lady was running away from Arthur during in his camp. And you could talk more about that because I think you're also planning a show around that. But I noticed they said you can burglarize houses. Sure, you're in a gang in the dying days of the Wild West. You are a bunch of bad people. You're gonna rob a house. What we saw during our demo was really cool. Is how you come across like burglary targets. We came up to this hill in the middle of the night. We saw a lantern. Came up to this guy
Creepy guy.
very creepy,
Really weird
on like
interaction.
yarn. He had a bunch of like sepia tone photos of this one woman like clothespin to the yarn, like this gallery shrine to this woman, and he's like, hey, so do you have a girlfriend? And you can respond negatively or positively. We kept responding negatively. We're like, no, I don't know. He's like, are you sure? And then you can keep responding negatively. He's like, well, look at this woman. And then turns out he was essentially stalking this woman who was a widow, a recent widow, because her husband, he said he saw her husband get shot. So now he's been like taking care of her by watching her. And she lives in this farmhouse over on the other side of this woods next to this hill. And anyway, like things escalated between us, and the person playing Alessandro, our coworker, ended up shooting him. But in Arthur's journal, he wrote down that farmhouse was a prime burglary location because he knows that a widow, lives there alone. So the way we came across that was very, very. We didn't come up to that hill in the lantern expecting to find a burglary place, and we probably, if we had never come across that, we might have just come across the farmhouse later on in the game without even knowing that you could come across it that way. And that's what I really liked. I actually, earlier this year, for all of its faults, I think Far Cry 5 actually did a great job of introducing you to certain quest lines through a variety of ways. There were some quests you could come across in like 5 different ways, whether it's this NPC or this note you found or just stumbling onto this like firefight or this crime scene. Red Dead seems to be taking that to another level insofar as you're coming across this from a variety of directions and they don't know which one you'll come across. Maybe you just spent 10 hours exploring and are coming back from the northeast where most people wouldn't go story-wise, but you're coming in from that angle, so they have to say, well, what if they don't stumble across the farmhouse? What can happen in the distance that they hear and that draws them over? Because so many of the things we came across was we heard something first, and then we saw a little blip on our radar, which you could turn off the HUD, but we had it on, so we saw a little blip and we're like, let's go check it out. It was the dude, like he was retching coming out of the swamp.
Yeah.
So as far as what the trailer showed, that burglary thing seemed minor in the trailer, and I was like, I wonder if people like thought that was a big thing that the woman narrating was pointing out. I was like, why would she point that out? Of course you can rob places. But knowing how we came across it, it wasn't the burglar itself. It was how we came across it. It was the actual lead up to that seemingly mundane task otherwise.
Felt like part of Arthur's story.
Yeah, exactly.
I think something that stood out, he mentioned before about hygiene, plays a pretty big role in this game, and they talked about it a little bit in the trailer, but I think one thing that Rockstar had also pointed out was that if you let yourself go, like gang members and people will be like, hey, you're kind of bringing down morale, like you gotta get your shave maybe clean a little bit. So the idea of that, I think, also brings back memories of like GTA San Andreas, where you like could eat and get bigger and things like that.
Right.
But that is something that we saw a lot more of, not as much as I would have liked to see. Like I want to push that to the test, see how far I can, make Arthur a disgusting pig.
Is that going to be something you do in the game? I mean, are you just no bathing, no shaving?
Yep, I think so. Just to see what happens, because even in that trailer, you kind of got that glimpse of he was all muddy and disgusting, and he walked by a woman, and the woman immediately just turned around and walked away. She's like, nuh-uh.
Yeah, because, I mean, you're going to, you got into that bar fight, and the guy threw you through the window into the muddy street from that town they showed in the first ever.
Yeah.
It wasn't even the gameplay trailer. It was that first Red Dead trailer. And you had mud all over you. And you walked up to that rain barrel to wipe your face off. But if you hadn't done that, I imagine that would contribute to your hygiene faster than just not showering.
Well, if I saw correctly in the background, one guy actually does, when you walk by, he covers his nose. It's really cute.
Apparently, Rockstar was telling us, they'll essentially pull you aside and tell you it's a problem, like the kind of talk like someone might have had with their 15-year-old boy in high school. Like, all right, we got to talk about hygiene.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. The trailer was also great. I think the trailers sell the game short for sure. Like they're listing features, and I know that's what people are excited about, but I don't envy Rockstar having to convey what they're at least trying to go for with this game, right?
I think their approach, I think that they've been fairly minimalist, and that's been smart for them. I mean, obviously they understand that Groundswell is going to build around this, but they're going to look at features because they want us to have a clear, reasonable video game language understanding of what's happening. But trying to give people an idea of a brand new experience, something that they really haven't done before in games, that is, I agree, very difficult. I think their approach of less is more with that is probably the right way to go about it.
Yeah.
Just present things you can understand and present mystery. And they've done a great job presenting mystery. We know practically nothing about any of these people. We just know they all seem a little interesting. I mean, we know about most of the gang, literally one quote and one line description.
Yeah.
And yet these are people we're going to spend 100 hours with.
Yeah.
And that's a great approach, I think.
Well, it's two things. So then there's the whole idea that the word of mouth is going to spread. People are going to start saying, this happened to me, this happened to me. You have streamers are going to be streaming the game. I think, I agree. I think they know what they're doing. And we did run into a bunch of characters. I don't think we should talk too much about the characters.
No.
I guess I'll defer to you because I don't want to spoil anything.
That's entirely up to you. We do talk some about spoilers here, but if you'd like to avoid them, maybe we'll have you back on to talk about characters as we get closer, if y'all are comfortable with
Yes. I mean, I personally, the first 2 hours were so strong and impactful that I want people to experience it on their own.
Well, how about that?
Yeah.
Story-wise, it was strong and impactful?
Yeah, okay, yeah. So broad strokes, just to kind of like contextualize it because it was kind of confusing. Played first 2 hours, and then we jumped to that. We heard rumblings of that train robbery that you saw in the gameplay trailer. No, the demo you played.
Right, the demo I played.
And then we went back to the open world around Valentine, the first camp you get to with Dutch, with like Javier Escuela, with Bill Williamson, with the gang.
Bring me Javier Escuela.
Yes, and then we just went exploring. The first 2 hours, though, the setup, I will say it's not the typical like desert Wild West vibe. I would say like think Hateful Eight, and it is very much it starts in a time of turmoil for the gang, and then from there it really I think it did a phenomenal job. Even if you didn't play Red Dead, like outside of callbacks to the first game, I think it did a phenomenal job of setting up who this character is, how Dutch leads the gang and his style of leadership. Arthur, even I grew to love Arthur over the 5 hours we played.
Yeah, I did too. I was surprised because Marston hit such a high bar for me in Red Dead Redemption 1. Like when someone asks me, who's your favorite protagonist of the video game? Most of the time I will say Marston.
Oh, really? Okay.
I thought he was fantastic. And I was not worried, but I was like, I don't know if Arthur can fill these shoes. And I don't necessarily want to say he did fill those shoes, but just the couple hours we spent with him, I was like, yep, I'm sold. Like, I'm totally okay stepping away from Marston and playing as this character.
You like Arthur?
Yeah. I liked him. And I think one of the things that made him particularly strong, at least for me, was when you'd interact with gang members, you could tell there was so much history between him and them that wasn't really spoken, but just the way they talked to each other, the way he made fun of people, the way he reacted, it just felt really natural. It felt really fascinating.
So we talk a lot about the cinematic film influences of Westerns on Red Dead Redemption and what's coming in Red Dead 2 on this show. We do that a great deal because Rockstar is probably the single most cinematically oriented game company in AAA. But as much as I love things like The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance or Unforgiven, my all-time favorite Western is a novel, Lonesome Dove. Either of you ever read it? You've read it, Mike. Okay.
Yeah, who wrote that?
Larry McMurtry.
Yes, thank you.
And won the Pulitzer Prize for American literature. It's an amazing piece of writing. Sequels all suck, but the original book is amazing.
Yeah.
And what I love about Lonesome Dove is from the very first page, you're introduced to a cast of a few people, all of whom have known one another for 20, 30 years. And you weren't there for any of that. And so just like you're describing with Arthur, there's all this history and all these relationships, and you're learning about it through the course of an 800-page novel. Is that the kind of approach we're seeing here in Red Dead? Is that what the feel we're going to get?
From what we saw, I think so. And it's, the relationship you have with Micah, you kind of know that there's history between them. Then the relationship you have with, oh man, there's so much stuff that happened. But yeah, it's crazy. To answer your question, yeah, in that 2 hours they packed a lot, and it was not overwhelming though. It just it was in media res, you just immediately felt like you were part of the gang. But then Rockstar has that added challenge of, like, it's very much a role-playing game with Arthur. How do you want to play Arthur? And how do you want to interact with items in a house? Or how do you want to interact with NPCs? Or how do you want to interact with this quest giver, other gang members, this random person you come across along the road? But I think Arthur works really well because they kind of paint him to be... I thought he would just be this kind of boring everyman. But from what we played, he's even keeled, and that works well because you can play him however you want. So that works well because Dutch seems to trust him with big decisions.
Yeah.
Dutch doesn't seem to micromanage him from what we saw. So Dutch will be like, Arthur, you figure this out. I got to go handle this. And he's kind of like, maybe not first in command, but close. Maybe like he's like the confidant. So
like the sergeant major?
Yeah, something like that. And you'll be tasked with these big decisions like whether to kill this person or not. And it works well because if you were like the hothead of the group, the role playing wouldn't make sense. You would be like the Trevor immediately. You'd of course he'd do this, but it makes sense that they would give that role playing role to someone who could go either way, especially because there is a temper. We saw a temper that Arthur has and a violent streak. There's a reason he's part of this outlaw gang, or vice versa. There's the reason you can see this outlaw gang really affected him in certain ways because he was like raised up in it. And I really liked how they painted it. It reminded me of a Scorsese movie, if we're talking about cinema, in the sense that like Scorsese's very good at making you feel like part of a family. In Goodfellas, like that's kind of like the second half of the movie is how much they become sheltered and like how paranoid they get from that, and how all the members' wives all become this like group. It's almost like a cult. And Dutch has this charisma that I can totally see him having people under his sway. And in that first 2 hours of the game, like, you kind of get the sense that that's being threatened a little bit, his control, and you see personalities come out of the crack that opens, and it's really fascinating to see. And like, you didn't have 30 hours to lead up to that point. We had 10 minutes, and they pulled it off. And I'm already like really wanting to see what happens the rest of the time. Again, like, it was by nature of the preview, I do want to say like it could potentially fall apart. Right now, the story they set up leads me to be very confident about what will play in its full version for sure.
It's extraordinary hearing you say all of that. That's a lot to digest. But my impression in the 2 hours I played was that among the many, many improvements, I love Red Dead Redemption. I think it's a spectacular video game. But I was really impressed by the improvement in the quality of the writing in the 2 hours I saw. As much as I like the writing in Red Dead, I think Red Dead 2's was leaps and bounds better, having had a decade to refine and build on that. Was your impression the same way?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I hate to keep bringing up Assassin's Creed, but I had just started the game again because I needed to capture some footage, and hearing that dialogue a second time was like, I think that's like the test of dialogue, right? You hear it once, and you're like, all right, and then you hear it a second time, and then it's like, it can go really south. And to be fair, I've only heard the dialogue in Red Dead Redemption 2 once, but just hearing the way characters would talk, the way they'd build these relationships super quickly, and part of it absolutely is the voice acting too. The voice acting is fantastic from what we heard or from what we saw, and I think that lends a lot to it. But yeah, the way, kind of like what Mike was saying, the way you just kind of immediately felt part of this family right away, and listening to Arthur respond to these people, like the cook, he has a very interesting relationship with that. You don't know the history of it, but just hearing it's funny, and I don't know. I agree. I think the writing is far better than Red Dead, and I thought Red Dead Redemption's writing was great to begin with. Too.
Yeah.
To add on to that, I think there's way less exposition this time around, which is saying something because we literally saw the beginning of the game, the story where most things have exposition. Like the cook you mentioned, there's this incident. So he used to be a naval officer. He had a chef on a battleship, and they keep referencing. They're like, "What the hell happened out in the water?" Like, but it's not just people saying that to Arthur. It's you overhear other people saying it to each other. Other people have the same secrets and anecdotes that you are sharing with characters. And like, I don't think. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to come across a point where you have a secret with someone, then you overhear someone else having a secret. It's like nothing stays secret in this gang. So, there's this incident that happened. Like, they keep mentioning the Blackwater Incident, and that we don't even know what that is. It's just this thing that went south before the events of Red Dead 2. So, before the events of Red Dead as well, obviously. But they keep referencing these past events, but then they don't they're not like, oh, that was when this character did this. They're just like, yeah, I don't want to talk about Blackwater, and then you just move on. And then all of a sudden, like, someone's really pissed because someone drank the last of that whiskey without offering them the last sip. And then you notice tangentially that there are rabbit skulls next to the oven. You're like, oh, that's a weird animal to pick. And then later on, someone said, I'm so fucking sick of eating rabbit all the time. I'm like,
wow.
Like, in any other game, I would have thought that was a coincidence. But, like, the craft on display here, like, you just don't notice the artifice. It all feels so, it doesn't feel like a veneer. It feels like just this thing you're like engulfed in. And the writing is just, the writing combined with the music from the first 2 hours, the music was phenomenal, as you could expect. The cinematic camera while you're riding is just absolutely, like, gorgeous, whether it's like it's a camera resting on this branch that Arthur kind of brushes by, and then it takes a long shot as they're coming down the hill at sunset. And oh my God, it did feel like I would absolutely love to use the follow road function or whatever it is, and then turn the cinematic camera on and just see how long it takes to get across the entire world with the cinematic camera, with the music playing. The
cinematic camera blew me away. I don't usually care for cinematic cameras in games, but I've never seen one implemented this way. It is the word cinematic has been misused up to this point, I feel like, in most uses of that camera. The fact that it changes angles every few steps, but it doesn't just change angle, changes distance, changes light, it felt like edited scenes in a film. I don't know how they did that dynamically.
It's interesting too, because Rockstar has been doing this for a while, actually. Like, with GTA 4 is when they first did it, but it was absolutely useless because you still had to control the car. So you'd be like, have these super weird angles, and like,
it was a glorified crash cam.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was.
And in 5 they refined it some.
But this, it actually feels, it seems like an option. Like, I was using it pretty much whenever I had to go anywhere, I'd always turn that on, which is something I haven't done in previous Rockstar games, I would say.
So I have to ask a question that's purely selfish, and I think I probably already know the answer. But my greatest minigame hope for Red Dead Redemption 2 has been baseball leagues. Did you see any sign of sandlots, stadiums, or any other baseball paraphernalia?
I don't think so. I wish I would have been looking out for it now.
Yeah,
my dream is that every settlement would have its own sandlot, that Arthur could join baseball leagues, bet on baseball leagues, influence the outcome of games, become a player, and that there's a secret ending where he goes off to play in the first World Series.
Now I want that.
Yeah, looks like no baseball confirmation this week. All right, let's get granular for a second.
Yeah.
Favorite animal you saw?
The horse that we waved to an NPC on the road. He was replacing the horseshoe on his horse on the side of the road, and we waved hi. He stood up and said, "Hey!" Horse bucked and kicked him in the head. We heard his skull crack, and he died. And the horse ran off. We went up to check on him. He was dead. And we looked back at Rockstar. We're like, was that our fault? They're like, indirectly, yeah. But that horse sold the game for me. So,
that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that happened to John Ryan too. Actually,
okay.
Something very similar.
So that's what I was wondering. How often will these things repeat? I guess time will tell when we play the whole game.
That's kind of great. I think that happened to JR too. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I guess not really an animal, but one of my favorite moments, I guess, just coming off that, because that was kind of a favorite moment that we had. But another one that was really good that I think kind of speaks volumes about this game is, we come up to this railroad track, and underneath there's a guy, and he comes up and he was like, "Hey, do you want to have a little bottle shooting competition?" And I was like, "Sure, why not? Let's do this." And he's like, "How about $5 bets?" And I was like, "Cool." And he's like, "All right, we're going to shoot all these bottles. Whoever shoots more wins." And I was like, "All right, fine. I accept. We go." And he beats me, and he's like, "Oh, do you want to do double or nothing?" And I'm like, "Nah, I'm done." And I hit no. And then I started to walk away because, in most games, even like GTA 5, it would have been like minus $5.
Right.
And you would have just lost your money. And as I'm walking away, he's like, "Hey, where's my money?" And I was like, oh, I actually have to do that. So I try to go over to him, and then he pulls out his gun, and we get in a gunfight.
That's rad.
Yeah.
So that like was the highlight for me, just because like that broke my brain, because it's something simple as just handing this guy money.
Yeah.
But every other game would have been like minus $5.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, because I think that if there's a design philosophy that's come through, I've talked to a lot of folks now that have played the game. I've played the game. I've talked with the folks that demoed the game at Rockstar, and it seems again and again the resounding theme is tearing down video games and rebuilding them in a different way than you've seen before. My favorite all-time Western, one of my favorite movies, is The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Y'all seen that? So it's John Ford. It's a deconstruction of Westerns. Here's a guy who spent his whole career making Westerns, taking all the movies he made previously, breaking them down on screen, putting all the legends under the full light, full candle power of his own criticism, and then making an even better movie that's a Western out of them. That's kind of the vibe I've been getting from Red Dead 2. The more discussions like this I have, is that that's what they tried to do with open world video games here. And again, demos are demos. Starting to sound like they might have pulled it off.
Yeah, because so people are saying, they're like, what is the game like revolutionary? I was like, I don't think it's like revolutionary. I think it's, you kind of mentioned it earlier, I think it's finally, from what we've seen, it's actually earning those cliches we've been using for open world games for so long, and hyperbole. It's actually something I would call immersive. It's something I would call, like the writing's engaging. I think it's actually nailing all those kind of catch-all terms that we've used for 10 years now. And I think it's actually earning it. It's not something we have to kind of like imagine is there at a certain point in order to have fun. I think it's just is there. And I wonder how far we have to go to actually find the seams. But it seems like it's pretty far.
I think one of my big tests that I'm curious about is, so open world games, you go to a town, like a lot of people just, go on a killing spree. They're like, kill as many people as they can, get wanted, like fight off the cops or whatever, and then leave and then come back to the town and nothing. It's almost as if nothing happened. I think what'll be at least the test for me is I want to try that in Valentine, and I want to come back and I want to see what happens. Like, is there no one there? Are shop owners dead? Like the people who are alive, are they going to hate me? And it sounds like that's kind of what Rockstar is trying to say. Like, people are going to remember these interactions. But I'm really curious to see if you play Red Dead Redemption 2 like you would Grand Theft Auto. I'm curious to see where it kind of stacks up.
I'm wondering how much they're betting on the idea that we won't want to after a little while. Because on one side it's this huge open world revision, but the other is this obvious attention they've given to a more serious, more dramatic narrative. Are they hoping that hyper-realism is going to draw us into a story where we don't necessarily want to kill everybody in town because we're too busy being Arthur? And I've wondered how much they're hinging on that. John was talking about, he did something mean to a kid in the game. John Ryan, my co-host, who is from IGN and is on as a frequent guest. And John was talking about how he did this thing to a kid and he just felt awful about it afterward. And he didn't expect that because he saw the repercussions of what happened. He's like, wow, they really got me. Is that going to be part of the counterbalance, you think, or not?
I'd imagine it would be. I think the way they're setting it up, it definitely would be. I'm just curious how many people would listen to that if they're if they want to push against this world as much as they can.
Yeah.
I'm curious how much people.
I mean, it's going to be, at the end of the day, you're going to find the boundaries. It's a game, but yeah, I think because of the amount of realism, it's a challenge that, I think it's a slippery slope. How much realism do you introduce? And then because at a certain point, the realism is going to lead people to look for more realism below that and get more granular as you go. And then at a certain point, you might see the seams and it might kind of remove you from the game. But from what I've seen, there's enough going on that like I just won't be able to, unless I really just get in and I'm bullheaded, like I'm going to find some way the game doesn't work. I don't think I'll find that if I'm actually just enjoying the world, exploring the world, doing everything. And
yeah, you're talking about the seams. I'm thinking about one of my favorite examples in games of complexity within a limited system. Every board has an edge, right? Every game has borders you're going to reach eventually. Chess is 64 squares, 32 of which are occupied by pieces at the beginning of the game, 16 for each side. There are only 32 blank squares on the board at the beginning of that game. And there are only 20 possible opening moves for one side in chess. Yet by the third, fourth turn, the iterations are rapidly cascading into the millions. By the 60th, into numbers so high that the most powerful computers on Earth cannot solve the game. That's done with 64 squares and 32 pieces. I wonder how much farther you can take predictability with the kind of power and the human resources available at a place like Rockstar right now. And I wonder how far they're going to be able to carry it. I'm really intrigued by that. I wonder how much chess design philosophy is going into this, that we can get a lot done in a small space relatively.
Yeah, I mean, like 5 hours wasn't even enough for us to get a sense of where we were going in the open world, let alone like anything close to that. So that's definitely that leaves me optimistic for the long term in Red Dead. Yeah, it's funny, like 5 hours in a game, like I didn't notice anything that like reminded me I was playing a game. Like not that I can think of. I mean, everything from the way that he slung his gun over his shoulder to like the exit wounds coming out of an animal to they seem to be saying like, if you have a question, can I do X? The answer is probably yes.
And often when I tried, it was intuitive. I liked, for example, I took aim. I was learning to aim and fire. You know, it's relatively similar. But then discovering I could just, if I wanted to fire fast, I was fanning the hammer. You know, just, wait, I dropped it. It's like, there's got to be a way to sacrifice accuracy for, and it worked exactly like it felt like it should. Yeah. Weird. That was great. And a lot of that kind of stuff there as well. My favorite marketing moment, I like good marketing. My favorite marketing moment of all time was when I was much younger and The Matrix was about to come to theaters. Do you remember the first Matrix trailer back before we all knew what The Matrix was going to be?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so once upon a time, there was a time we didn't know what The Matrix was, and there'd never been a movie like it. The Matrix trailer was just a series of images from that movie. We thought it might be about UFOs. We thought it might be about secret agents. You didn't know. You saw all these pieces that didn't make any sense together, but they were all intriguing. And then it cut to the Matrix logo, and you just heard Lawrence Fishburne's voice go, the line from the movie. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. And that was the end of the commercial. I was like, sold.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was how they introduced something new. I get that feeling from Red Dead that until you play, you don't quite get it.
Yeah. And that's why like our job's been tough the last few weeks explaining what makes the game tick, or at least what made our experience tick. And that it's one of those games where I don't think like you can really fully understand it all until you're just fully in it for hours.
It's been interesting because the embargo lifted Tuesday, and I was like, hey, on Twitter, ask me anything. I played 5 hours. I can talk about pretty much anything that I saw. And the questions that I was getting were like, can you swim? Does it have photo mode? Like what? Like, can you? I don't know. They're just like a bunch of little things that like I was answering them, but it was like I'm still not really getting across what this game is. I must have answered like 150, 300 questions, but I feel like in none of that I was actually able to describe to people what this game is and why they should be excited, other than the fact that it's another Rockstar game.
So maybe it's been hard doing that in answering questions. If you were going to summarize, how would you do it? Well, if you were going to try to talk about the effect it had on you and why you think it's special.
Kind of like what we were talking about earlier. I just think, like what you were saying with chess, there's just so many possibilities that it's so hard to comprehend, at least based on what we saw, that it's exciting.
Okay. It's
exciting seeing a game that has such a diversity in the ways you can play it out and the way things play out.
Hey, I've used this example from my childhood. I'm a very old man. I walked to an arcade around my 5th, 6th birthday, somewhere around this time, and to a Chuck E. Cheese. And there was a Super Mario Brothers versus arcade machine in there. I hadn't even touched an NES at this point. And I put in a quarter, and the world just kept going. I'd never seen that before. I'd never fathomed that before. You ran to the right, and there were clouds and worlds and underground areas and castles and treetops and oceans, and it just kept going. And everything that I'd experienced in video games before that didn't make any language sense compared to what I was seeing there. It was like it had come down from outer space. Is this potentially that kind of jump or not? What do you think?
Yeah, potentially. From what we played, it's like a good start. I don't know if that'll be pulled off in the end, but like I said, right now I'm not convinced the game is revolutionary. I think it's meeting that high bar that we've been putting for other open world games for like a decade now. But I guess, yeah, it could be potentially.
Okay, so those dangerous questions we were asking about, I actually sent out a call for a few questions here. Let's see how many of those are in fact, recognize because people are asking a lot about. Oh, look. Okay. Did you go fishing?
We did not. We actually, I didn't know they didn't tell us there was fishing until we saw the trailer.
Yeah.
And then I saw that and I was like, should have done it.
Yeah.
All right. He didn't say no opportunity to go fishing. As someone who naturally meanders in open world games, this one from James, is there a chance that I will go 5 hours without touching any mainline quest except for initial game opener?
100%, yes. That's pretty much what we did with our 5 hours.
We got distracted.
Okay.
I got like halfway across the map before I realized, oh shit, I'm in the middle of the swamp.
Yeah, we could have gone on for hours more, but Rockstar was like, all right, wrap it up.
Did it feel like distracted, or did it feel like
Distracted is not like, pleasantly distracted. Like I said, the worry I would have is that those emergent things will happen too often and feel less, kind of desensitize me to them. But in that amount of time, I was pleasantly pulled left and right just into exploring and being curious.
Matthew asks, I know certain things are manual and meant to be immersive, like manually giving NPCs money for wagers. Hey, there we go. And it not being auto-deducted, etc. But what other items are planned on being manual? Any actions that would be manual versus automated, like weapon cocking, reloading, fishing, etc.?
Pulling weapon, weapon loadout, swapping on your horse is a little bit more manual than I thought it would be. Like, actually, it was kind of more of an animation, but if you're on the other side of the horse, he'll actually have to reach over and grab it. As far as like loading a deer onto the back of the horse seemed a little bit more involved, and then the horse like runs differently as the deer is kind of weighing it down in the back, especially in deep snow. Picking up people to loot their bodies also. It's not just this padding. You actually, if they're face down, you grab their like coat and you lift them up and actually have to feel for their belt.
He'll like dig through their pockets on their coat and feel and stuff like that.
Did y'all experience something that happened to me? And it's another one of those little like kind of quality of reality. We talk a lot about quality of life in games. I think I'm going to try to coin quality of reality for Red Dead because I'm arrogant. I went to loot someone on the ground, and one of my fellow gang members had already done it. I went to loot a body. Well, one of the guys I was working with had already looted that body. Because you're with a bunch of criminals, of course they're going to loot the bodies.
Yeah.
And so the world wasn't centered around me. I'm with John Marston and Bill Williamson. They're going to take money too if they get the chance. Did that happen to y'all?
That didn't specifically, no.
Yeah, that's if I remember correctly, that was why I couldn't get money from some of the bodies, is because my fellow squad mates had looted them. And again, it made so much sense. Of course it's that way.
Yeah, I love that. I didn't see that.
Yeah. And then I picked up another guy and threw him into a fire to see what would happen.
Yeah.
Oh, how'd that go?
I put him in by his wrist, and the fire caught on his wrist and then slowly spread up his clothing, consumed his body, and then gradually he blazed and cooked in front of me.
Okay.
And it was gross.
Sounds like a Rockstar game.
Yeah. It was. But it wasn't gross for the sake of gross. It was systemic. It was like, hey, what would logically happen if I took a dry-clothed human body and put it in a fire? Mm-hmm. That's what would happen. And so that was amazing. Here it is. Swimming. From Drew.
That's a weird one because we didn't actually swim in the demo. I am hesitant to answer it. I have a feeling you can swim, but I don't know. We didn't do it.
Okay, you guys didn't do it. Does the edge of the map look obvious like the first Red Dead, or can you go to a lot of mountains? This one from Descendiophobia.
This is kind of funny. When we the Rockstar PR person, she loaded into a different save, and she was kind of just showing us some of the later game stuff. And then she was describing the world. We were in an open area, and she's like, see that mountain over there? And normally, you're always expecting like, oh, you can go there. She's like, you can go past that mountain. Way off in the distance.
It's like on the edge of the draw distance in what was already a very good looking game.
Yeah. So
just keep on going.
Yeah.
The map
There's more mountains behind
massive. I don't know what the boundaries look like or what they will be. But from what was described to us, it sounds like you are going to be able to go one direction for a very long time until you can't go that direction anymore.
That reminded me of Breath of the Wild when I first played it. It was all about boundary testing for me. And deliberately, I stayed as low as I possibly could once I got off the plateau until I found the tallest mountain I possibly could. And I climbed and struggled and climbed because you're weak, you don't have a lot of stamina. But I found a way to get to the top. and getting over that and just discovering, oh wow, the world's on the other side of this instead of walking around it. That was one of my favorite moments in gaming. You made me so happy, yay. Let's see. Kyle says they had access to Red Dead 2 and they only played 5 hours. What could possibly be more important than staying home and continuing playing? I don't think Kyle realized you were at a demo event.
Yeah, we went to Rockstar. They had a build set up, and we only had a certain amount of time before they kicked us out. We tried to keep playing for your sake, but they did not let us. I would not be here right now if I had the game.
Mr. Waterballoon asks, which edition do you recommend?
Yeah, there's a few.
I
Three of them?
haven't looked into it really.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Is there $100? There's the $100 version one, right?
There's several different editions, and they all offer different things.
I personally usually say no just because I don't like the clutter, but if you're a big Red Dead fan, maybe it's worth it.
Go with what you want.
I don't know.
We have from Leon here, how good are the horse testicle physics? If I punch them or shoot at them, will they act accordingly? If I keep punching them, will they turn blue? And then it gets gross after that.
It gets gross after that?
Yeah, it gets worse after that.
I noticed my horse pooping, and I noticed, we saw the horse drifting and falling. I messed my horse up. I fell off a cliff with him, and it busted us both up. I did not pay attention to the genitals, but I heard that there were a few people at Rockstar whose job largely was to get those physics right.
Perfect, yeah.
So I can't say that I saw them firsthand, but it sounds like you're in good hands, so to speak.
Team horse.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, John Ryan talked a lot about horse team during his visit there.
Okay.
Apparently there really were people that just have been working on horses for years.
Yeah.
Which is kind of rad.
It shows. It feels good.
Let's see. We have a question from John who says, will eating and drinking affect Arthur Morgan's actual weight, make him fat, skinny, more muscular, etc.?
That's what they told us. Yeah. So if you eat unhealthy, I think they mentioned if you go to the convenience store and buy a bunch of chocolate and eat a bunch of chocolate, that's going to affect Arthur.
Curtis asks, approximately how many folks are throwing a hoedown within the first 5 hours of the game? Did you encounter any hoedowns?
I wish. I don't think so.
Hoedown not yet confirmed. We did see some Under the Stars dancing in the trailer, so there's some kind of dancing going on. But
the closest we got to dancing was a few people at the saloon before Jake got into that bar fight.
Sinistrada asks, will it be homes that I can live in and decorate?
I don't know. That's a question that I've been wondering too.
Okay.
Because you couldn't Red Dead Redemption.
Couldn't GTA 5 too.
You couldn't GTA 5. Yeah,
I'd be
know.
very
I hope
surprised
so.
if you couldn't.
I wonder about that being a Red Dead Online feature.
Right. Yeah.
It'd probably have
That
to
would
be.
make sense.
But from what we saw, it seems like the camp is your main place that you're going to be going, hanging out, communicating with people. Whether you can get other things on top of that, I don't know. But you will have that camp, which is home, and that does move throughout the story.
Let's speculate for a second. I just want to feed off you guys' curiosity. Let's move out of the realm of hard news for a moment and talking about Red Dead Online. You think that's where we'll see Undead Nightmare?
Yes.
Jake says yes.
Sure.
Mike says sure.
Yeah.
You think they'll go full supernatural, Ghost Riders in the sky, vampires, werewolves, things that go bump in the night?
A couple years. I think it'll take a while, but I think at some point, especially with what we see with GTA 5, DeLoreans, flying DeLoreans and stuff,
Yeah.
I think it's
Jetpack motorcycles.
bound to happen, especially when you consider the fact that Rockstar has a history with this Undead Nightmare as is.
Yeah, Undead Nightmare makes sense for that. You ever played Deadlands? You're talking about D&D earlier. Deadlands, the RPG that's effectively like gothic horror Wild West.
That sounds rad.
Oh, it's freaking great. It's like poker hands to cast spells, and it's fantastic. Really, really, really great game. Recommend that. Play some Deadlands if you never have before. It's a great game. Gentlemen, you have subjected yourself to a line of questioning today just for the sake of kindness, and I want you to know how much I appreciate it. You have had an experience that I am really jealous of. I'm going to leave with this final question. What's the stupidest thing that you did or that happened to you in 5 hours of wandering around this world?
For me, I don't think I adequately sold how dumb I looked So I clearly knew the cliff was too tall for my horse to jump off. But I saw a carriage that I really wanted to rob. It was going, say I'm heading north, and I saw a carriage going west to east under this railroad bridge. So I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna jump off the little hill onto the carriage, or at least near it, and scare them. The cliff was way higher than I thought. My horse tripped. His stamina core depleted right away. So he had stamina left, but it was not gonna refill. He was limping.
He wasn't limping. He was on the ground.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was. Well, once he got back up, he was limping.
Broken.
He was just like all of a sudden like this lame horse. I myself was limping. So the people on the carriage were probably laughing. I don't know. That's the thing with this game. I imagine the people saw that and were laughing, not just like scared. But yeah, I looked very dumb doing that.
Very inept robbery going on right there.
Yes.
A little bit of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Absolutely, I biffed it.
All right, there you go.
I think for me was when I first got my hands on the control. Well, actually, not the first time. But the first time I got my hands for the open world, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to cause some trouble. So I came up to another stagecoach and just ran right into it with my horse and pissed the guy off. I didn't mean to run into it, but he got really mad, and I like tried to talk him down. And he was like, I don't want to hear anything from you. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to rob this guy. So I robbed him, and then witnesses see. And then it just became a game of me like trying to like talk down all these witnesses, like, no, don't tell on me, or just shooting them if they don't, and then that would attract another witness. So I was just running back and forth trying to like contain this situation until finally the law was like, nah, you're done.
This is just spiraled out of control.
Yeah.
What were the final repercussions? Did you have to go on the run? Did the law take you down?
I did. I hopped on my horse and just kind of rode over the hill and waited, and just waited for the wanted level to go down. They did say like if I had pushed it farther, they could have put out bounties for me, but because I guess they didn't see my face.
Okay.
They weren't able to do that.
And they actually come and like investigate the scene.
Like there was people who come, they like check out the bodies.
Like Pinkertons come along and start looking through the. Okay.
I also, one thing I wanted to mention was, so like the game is setting up its own rule set. It's a very complex, vast rule set in this game, if the first 5 hours are anything to be believed. So I had a witness. She was a woman from a stagecoach, and I just killed the driver. I was going to rob the stagecoach. The woman had jumped out, started running toward town, and it said, you have a witness. So I ran up to her. I didn't want to kill her. She didn't do anything wrong. I pointed my gun at her. She put her hands up, and then she started to slowly inch away from me. I fired into the air like they've shown you can done, and I said, I threatened. I was like, you didn't see shit. Don't tell anyone. She's like, okay, I won't. She leaves, still going back toward town, and I leave to get on my horse thinking I'm safe. She still told the sheriff.
She lied.
So that's what really excites me. The game wasn't just setting up its own rules. The game at that point, 3 hours in, was confident enough to break its own rules, and I still was fine with it.
Right, because you don't control that woman. Why would she not lie? I mean, maybe she was scared, but maybe she'd lie and wait to tell the sheriff.
It's not. It doesn't. It didn't feel like a game at that point. It felt like an open world, and those are two very different things at certain points. And I think
what happens next time you see her? You know,
maybe I recognize her. Maybe I would also have loved to follow her back, kind of at a distance, to see her. I'm fairly certain that she actually went into the sheriff's office or the deputy or to the marshal. I would have loved to see them all like kind of hurry out and get on their horses. Like, again, this is all in my head. This is the kind of stuff I imagine in a normal open world game. But I think Red Dead is kind of populating my imagination with its game a little bit more and like requiring less of my imagination.
Yeah, it's closing that gap.
Yeah, and it's pretty astounding to see that, because I am going to like kind of kick the tires and see where the cracks start to form, if they do. But I'm also fairly sure I'll enjoy a lot of this game, if not the whole thing.
Rad. And gentlemen, you have a show about Red Dead Radio starting this very Friday. Even as you watch and listen, where are people going to be able to find this, watch it, listen to it at all, etc.? Who's going to be on it? Tell us all about it.
It'll be on GameSpot.com or YouTube.com/GameSpot. As you said, first episode Friday. It'll be about the DNA of Red Dead Redemption, or the DNA of Red Dead Redemption 2. So we're going to kind of look back at Rockstar's history. From there, the topics can range from all sorts of things. We don't want to spoil that quite yet. It's called Quick Draw.
I got the launch day slot, apparently.
You got the launch day slot.
To do a video essay of some sorts.
Rad.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'll be doing, something. I mean, that's half my job anyway, but Red Dead, I'm sure, will give me a lot of stuff to talk about in depth. I really want to talk more about the realism, the level of realism, and whether it's getting in the way or whether it's supplementing this game.
Well, y'all know, if you ever need contributions to GameSpot about Red Dead, I know a guy.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Absolutely.
So, gentlemen, really, it was out of the kindness of your heart you decided to do this today. I appreciate it. I'm really happy to have you here. Anything else that you're working on right now you want to let people know about?
You got an Assassin's Creed feature going up. Mm-hmm. We're doing like Assassin's Creed stuff, kind of calm before the Red Dead storm, I'd say.
I love that we live in a world where like a 60 to 100 hour RPG is the calm before the storm.
Yeah, that's definitely disingenuous on my part.
Actually,
I don't think it is. Actually, I think it's exactly correct.
Yeah, I don't know.
By
That's
the time
weird.
this goes up, we'll have a bunch of Fallout 76 coverage on GameSpot. So
Oh, yeah.
I imagine a lot of people will be interested in that if they're also interested in Red Dead.
Yeah, that's a similar thing where people are like, how does this game even work? How am I going to be playing this? So hopefully Jean-Luc and Alessandro from GameSpot came back with a little more concrete answers from their press trip.
Oh, yeah. Were either of you down in the big hole?
No, but
Okay.
we were talking about this.
Yeah.
They went to the congressional bunker
Yeah.
that was, you told me, was disguised by resort
They
construction.
put a
on top of
resort
it.
on. If this is the place I'm thinking of, and it's in West Virginia, so I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure this is it. It was covertly designed during the Cold War to house members of Congress and their families and staffs during the event of a nuclear attack. And so they built a resort on top of it to hide it while they
Yeah.
were building the bunker underneath. And eventually, of course, the KGB, the GRU figured out where it was,
Yeah.
and then they just kept the resort there, and the basement became kind of this vast empty space, and it got rented out by Bethesda for this vault of it. But
Perfect.
it's one of those
Casino and
places
everything.
that helped inspire the idea of vaults.
Yeah,
it
right,
really
right,
was
yeah.
like an actual here's a place we can theoretically survive during the nuclear war for a while, and
Yeah.
have a government when there were people during the Cold War that were somehow convinced that when everyone was dead and nuclear winter destroyed us all and there was no food and no breathable air, that we would still have a country afterward. And
Or still want one.
yeah, and then after a while they're like, yeah, maybe we have not thought this through all the
Yeah.
way. So there's that too.
Yeah.
Don't do nuclear war, kids. It's bad. All right, friends. We'll be around here very, very soon with more Red Dead Redemption 2 news. Our next episode should be everything we know about Red Dead Redemption as we hurtle on the brink right there. I forgot how to speak words. We're headed right for the launch of this game. We're going to do an Everything We Know episode, get together and just go systematically through it all. That should be a long one. We hope you enjoy it. Thanks for supporting us. And again, if you want to help out financially, this is how I make my living, and I like living. So reddeadradio.com is a place that you can go and throw a few bucks my way. I do a bunch of Patreon exclusive content there that I think you'll enjoy, and I'd really appreciate it if you would. You can subscribe to us on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. We're on Android through Google Play and other podcast apps at all, etc. And you can always watch on youtube.com. Thank you very much. Also, if you haven't ever watched it, and the numbers would indicate that no one ever has, I make a little series called Hop, Blip, and a Jump, which is a series of documentary video essays about why video games matter and how they're connected to the real world. I think you'll like it if you give it a chance, so I hope you will. Gentlemen, happy trails. Hey, shout out to Patreon producers Tom Bach, Stuart Ferguson, and Jonathan, whose support makes this show possible.